Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome, and it's fantastic to see you here in our forum today, focusing on scenarios for a post-pandemic future. My name is Paul Middleton. I'm a managing director in Protiviti, and I'm joined here today by my colleagues from Protiviti, as well as my colleagues from Robert Half, our sister company. So this is our 20th weekly forum. We started on the 19th of March at the beginning of lockdown. And I don't think many of us at that stage truly imagined the enormity of what was about to happen and the impact it would have on our lives and our businesses. We've had a forum each week since then. And today, at the end of July, we reach our end of season one. From the very start, we decided that we wanted to make this forum about you, and not a sales or marketing agenda for Protiviti or Robert Half, but really about creating an environment where you can hear different perspectives and have the opportunity to collaborate. And we hope that that has really resonated with you and been useful for you over the weeks. We've covered a lot of ground together. We've looked at disruption, resilience, reimagination, and recovery. And as we begin to drift away on our summer holidays or our staycations, we thought it was a good time to pause and for us at Protiviti and Robert Half to reimagine what we can bring you in season two, which will start in a fortnight on the 13th of August. So you have 1 week's holiday. So more on that later, and we have a really exciting agenda for season two over the summer with some amazing and very different speakers. But for today, for our season finale, we wanted to look back, and also we wanted to look forward at what a post-pandemic future might look like. As ever, our aim remains consistent, and we hope that by hearing the forum's insights, innovations and perspectives, you will join the dots to your own challenges, which will help with your decision making and give you greater confidence to make the right decisions and make them quickly. So just to mix up the normal format a bit, this week we have a short video recap of the last 20 weeks. And then maybe after you shared some of your thoughts on the changes you have seen over the last 20 weeks, we're going to look at the future. And to help us do that, we have two wonderful panelists today who will be discussing how we should be thinking about the future, how we remain resilient, and the changing role of leadership, as well as our leaders from Robert Half and Protiviti businesses who will share some brief thoughts at the end around the differences these last 5 months have made to all of us. And I'll introduce them properly shortly. So before we kick off, a little around forum logistics. We have, how many people do we have so far? We have over 50, 60 people at the minute, which is fantastic to see. All clients, friends and partners on the call this morning. And we've deliberately, as ever, have a wide audience on the forum from diverse industries such as financial services, charity, manufacturing, food, public sector, retail, technology, hospitality, media, sport, and many more. And it's this diversity that we hope is most useful to you. So this is your forum, as ever. Please share your perspectives, ask your questions, disagree or agree with the panelists, and give your point of view. But please interact, and please make it as useful and as meaningful for you as possible. You can ask those questions through unmuting yourself or speaking up, or as many of you prefer, through using the chat function whenever you wish. For those of you who don't use Teams that often, and probably that's a small minority of you by now, you can highlight the chat function through pressing the show conversation icon, and you'll see a chat bar on the right-hand side. You can also raise your hand virtually in Teams, so please do this and I'll try and come to you. But if you're dialing in, if you're on a phone, as I did so at the start of the call, I may mute everyone. You'll have to press *6, I think, to unmute yourselves if you want to ask a question. Lastly, as with other weeks, we'll be having an after party. So please stay on the line after 9 a.m. for more debate and discussion with everyone who can join us then. So I'll just pause just then because we're looking to run a video this morning. I just want to check with my team if we're good to go on that. Gary, thumbs up, thumbs down. Yep, I think we're good. I'm getting the nod. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll be starting today with a video looking back over the last 20 weeks. I recognise that a number of you with us today have been dialing in every week, and it's fantastic to see so many familiar faces, while others of you are probably dialing in today for the first time. Either way, I hope this video captures the essence of what we've tried to achieve in this forum, and that it also reflects some of the key messages and learnings that will resonate with you. While it's playing, as obviously there's no such thing as a free lunch or maybe indeed a free breakfast at this point, I'd be very grateful for those if you might be able to just think about some of the things that have changed for you during the last 20 weeks? Any bold decisions you've made, and maybe share those with people after the video. So I'll open it to everyone after the video finishes. So without further ado, and a little drum roll, please can my team run the video? Oh, I apologise. I think we've had some sound gremlins there. But Gary, if you could maybe just run it again with sound, that would be much appreciated.
Give us a second. Becky's just setting it back up again.
Don't forget to tick that sound box, Gary.
2 seconds. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay.
Okay. I think if for everyone else that's probably buffering. I don't know if that's bandwidth or not, but Becky, Gary, I think we'll probably leave that if it's just going to buffer like that. So apologies, everyone. The video is designed just to kind of show some of those themes that we've been discussing over the last few weeks, what we've covered, and also some of the top themes that have really come out, and the big changes that we've seen over the last 20 weeks. Leon, I don't know if we is Leon on?
I'm here, Paul.
Hey, Leon. So you very kindly, while I was doing that, you offered to share some of your thinking around that. I don't know if everyone remembers here, but Leon joined us, gosh, probably back in like week 4 originally of the forum. And Leon turned his company round from making point of sale plastic for retail companies to also making PPE and in great quantities. And so, Leon, I know you had a story to tell of some of the big changes you've made over the last 20 weeks. Would you just care to share those briefly with us?
Yeah, I'd be delighted. I just tried to turn my camera on, Paul, and it buffered, so I'm going to leave it off. Just get some.
It's all the kids on Netflix at this time in the morning,
exactly.
Which is obviously reducing all our bandwidth.
So yeah, thanks for asking me to speak. So I feel privileged to have been part of this, actually, because outside of this forum, after randomly being asked to talk through another connection, it must be said, Paul and in particular, and Layla as well, have really tried to connect me with a whole bunch of people. That's been really helpful. I don't know Paul, never met him before talking. It just shows to the values that they talk about, they actually live them as well. That's the first thing to say. So they're good guys, which is why I'm really keen to sort of explain our story, I guess. And so 23rd of March, all of the shops closed. Our clients are Tesco, Next, Primark, all sorts of people like that. and pretty much overnight our business went from best January, February, beginning of March ever to absolutely zero, almost absolutely zero overnight, with people closing down orders that we'd been shipping, literally turning the trucks away. And so we went through a phase of what are we going to do? We were in a unique position where we'd just put people into a partnership a year before. And that's part of the story. I always believe there's a better way, and I believe that people should want to come to work and should be valued at work and should get something out of it more than just being paid. And we've heard through this forum about the scary numbers of 85% of people hating their job. Well, I don't want to work in a company like that, and I don't want people working with me in a company like that. So we set up this partnership, but as we found out, we couldn't furlough people. Turns out technically people were self-employed. So we had a choice, get rid of 30 people or try and do something different. And so we played around a little bit, and that playing around, some visors and some safety screens. And by Christmas, we would have made 10 million visors for the NHS. From day one of thinking we could maybe do, wouldn't 10,000 be good? That'll keep us going for a few months. We're going to get to around about 10 million, just a little bit less, but 10 million sounds better. So we'll go with that number. So an amazing turnaround. And that was, and I'm positive that that was because of the engagement we got from people by setting up more of a partnership feel to the business. I don't believe we would have done that. People wouldn't have been so engaged. They wouldn't have been so willing to step outside of their comfort zone. They wouldn't have been willing to do jobs that weren't their jobs if we weren't in that situation. There was no question. They just got on with it and really developed really, really quickly. We iterated so many different versions within a week or two, and yeah, just did amazing things. And so we've not only survived, we've thrived. And so it's a really amazing pivot. And actually, the goodness that you get from people by going through those difficult times just reconfirmed really what I believe in terms of how a business should be run. And so the end of the story is two things. What do we do next? How do we do that? And I don't know what happens after PPE, whether retail picks back up. But what I do know is I'm right in the partnership model. And actually, I've taken the decision that we're going to set up the company in its entirety to be employee owned. I think it's had that much of an impact on the way that we think, or I think, and some of the other senior people in this business think about getting the best out of people. Possibly it's lip service of, come on, let's all do things in the right way and look after our employees. But actually, it's deeper than that. And I think if we can create something where they're truly owners of this business, it will just thrive. And so that's what we're going to do. We're in the process. They don't know that yet. So no one can phone up and tell them. But
they do now.
within the next, hopefully there's no one on the call. Within the next, we should be setting up as an employee ownership trust, and they will have a financial stake in the business. And should we make some good profits in the future, they will share that profit. And should it be sold in the future, they will, not I, they will benefit from that sale. I truly believe that's the next way forward in employee engagement and doing the right thing with your employees post-pandemic.
That's a wonderful, heartwarming story there, Leon. And and thank you for sharing the journey with us both today and also early on in the forum as well. And also for those kind words at the start. Would anyone else, just before we come to our panelists, would anyone else like to share anything else and just react to what Leon from Display Mode has said, or add any of your own perspectives around what big decisions you've made in the last 20 weeks? Okay, not a problem. As I say, we'll keep the lines open after, so very happy to discuss them there as well. I do apologise around the video. We will post a link to it later on. I think it's probably asking a bit much for maybe at this time of morning to have a video streaming, but there we go. Leon from Display Mode, thank you ever so much. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we'll hear from you more throughout the forum. So Paul Claydon, I see you have your hand up. Sorry, Paul, you're on mute.
Or you've muted yourself again. You unmute yourself.
No, sorry, Paul, you're still on mute.
You could try turning your camera off as well, Paul. If your screen's a bit glitchy, that might help with connectivity.
All right, Paul. I'll move on, and hopefully you can come back with that later on as we get to our panelists. So I'd like to introduce them. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Rohit Talwar. Rohit is a global futurist, award-winning speaker, strategic advisor, author, and CEO of Fast Future. Rohit delivers keynote speeches, executive education, consultancy, research, and future-focused leadership mentoring to clients internationally. Rohit works with major corporations and governments, professional services, to help them anticipate and prepare for what the future holds. His company, Fast Future, is a research and insights business that specializes in the fields of future and foresight. And they explore, experiment, and create various future ideas and scenarios to deliver insights to individuals and businesses alike that want to consider and create a better future. Rohit's latest book is Aftershocks and Opportunities, Scenarios for a Post-Pandemic Future, which I'm sure he'll draw on today. And we're delighted that he can join us. David is a professor, sorry, our next panelist is David Denyer, and David is a professor of leadership and organizational change, as well as a commercial director at Cranfield School of Management, which is rated consistently as one of the world's top providers of leadership development. David has been at Cranfield for over 17 years and is an advisor, author, speaker, and thought leader on strategic agility, resilience, and organizational change. He is a fellow of the Academy of Social Sciences, British Academy of Management, and is a past recipient of the UK's Most Influential Thinker Award by HR magazine. David is also head of the Leading Complex Change Group at Cranfield, a team of interdisciplinary social scientists who are committed to linking research evidence to management practice. And again, delighted that David can join us today. So as I started saying at the very beginning, we wanted to look backwards to begin with and just reflect on what we've achieved. But really, I think we're all in this together, as we always have been. So looking forward is most important. And given it's harder than ever to predict what the ongoing impact of the pandemic will be, as well as the recovery timeframe, Rohit, I wonder if I could just come to you first and just ask you, how should we be thinking and framing our thinking about how we approach the next, say, 2 years? Because we don't know how long the pandemic will last. We don't know how long the economic recovery is going to last. And what kind of plausible scenarios should we be considering to allow us to remain resilient? And Rohit, you are on mute, sir.
Well, thank you for having me here and for inviting me to talk to the audience. I think this is a really interesting time where we're beginning to understand the futility of forecasting and prediction. Imagine you were in the travel industry. On Friday, you were celebrating a week of almost your fastest growth in bookings ever, because travel restrictions have been lifted to around 60 countries. Come 7 o'clock Saturday, you're ripping up those forecasts. By 9 o'clock Monday, pretty much everyone in your organization is tied up processing refunds to people who want to cancel their bookings because the UK government has said you have to quarantine if you're coming back from Spain and you really shouldn't be traveling anywhere. And we're beginning to understand that the life of a forecast is almost, it's almost invalid by the time we've finished writing it. And people are beginning to understand that you need a different way of approaching the future, that actually we need to think about a range of possible scenarios and be prepared for what our actions might be under any scenario. And we see, in the book we talked about this, and the thing that everyone is asking us to come in or project in via video and talk about are these two key driving forces right now. One is, how long is the pandemic going to last, from it being all over within a year because we have an effective vaccine to something that could last 2 or 3 years till it's eradicated globally. What we know is that this is a virus that travels around the world in seat 43C of an aircraft. And so even if you're doing really well at closing it down within your country, as soon as you open up your borders, it comes back in again. And so that's really starting to create a lot of challenges for people. And they're having to think about, okay, how might the pandemic evolve, but also what might the shape of the economic recovery be from, what some are hoping for, which is this vibrant V-shaped rebound, to something that could take 2 or 3 years. So if you map those against each other in a kind of 2x2 gradient quadrant, you start to see 4 different possible scenarios. Most of us would inherently go towards the most optimistic scenario of the pandemic is over pretty quickly and we get a vibrant rebound. And that's what I've seen a lot of people focusing on and hoping for. But now what we're seeing is the majority of people we survey, every time we do a webinar, we do a survey of where people think their country is and which scenario they're doing the most planning for. And over the last 18 weeks, what we've seen is a gradual shift from that most optimistic scenario to people saying the thing that they think is most likely in their country is the worst case scenario of a prolonged pandemic and a very slow economic rebound. And what that's done is given people the license to plan. And rather than hoping it would all be over by July, August, October, September of this year, people are now starting to accept that this could be a 1 or 2 year thing in terms of disruption of markets, disruption of supply chains. And that's leading to a really interesting outpouring of ideas, because we're having to look for what might we do if we think this pandemic is going to be with us for 2 years and disrupting us, and we're going to have a slow economic recovery. As you heard Leon say, how do we adapt our business? How do we generate ideas that would work in the worst case and that could then be viable? One of the most interesting ones we've seen is this recognition that people's incomes around the world are declining right now. If you look at the Kantar barometer, they're doing this COVID-19 barometer. It talks to about 100,000 people around the world in 60 markets. And what they found is that 56% of households around the world have seen their incomes decline. It goes up to 68% if you're a millennial, and 65% if you're Gen Z. And that's incredible. Another 19% expect those incomes to fall in the coming months. So how we adapt for a world where people think, consumers think they're going to have less money, businesses are probably going to be tighter, and really start to innovate around that. And one of the big developments we've seen is around supply chain. People having to think about different scenarios for the supply chain. We've seen the disruption caused by COVID-19 with supply routes being disrupted, flights being cancelled. If we start to play that out, what we know is the OECD research shows that from 2013 to 2019, globally, supply chains for companies on average were contracting by about 52 kilometers a year, i.e. people were producing more locally, serving more, focusing on local markets more. We're also seeing countries saying, we want to produce more locally. We don't want to be beholden to global supply chains. We're seeing a lot of manufacturers saying, actually, we'd rather move from that very volatile global supply chain to an innovation chain where we can license our IP to countries. We can partner with local manufacturers, help them set up local manufacturing, but really shift the nature of our business and what we do. So we're seeing people looking at these scenarios and saying, okay, what would we do in the worst case scenario? And actually seeing that some of the ideas that come up are really viable under any scenario and things that we should be doing now anyway. So I think this is a real opportunity, actually, recognizing that we need to be thinking about not just how we get through the next month, the next 6 months, the next year, but thinking about a 1 to 2 year horizon and starting to organize our business such so that you've got people focusing on the near term, which we always need to do because it's so volatile, but also people thinking about how we're going to get through the next year, and then having some people thinking about, well, what are the new opportunities that are coming up, the new challenges that come up when we start to look at these scenarios, and therefore what are the more radical things we can do to adapt our business? Where is the money going to be? Because not everyone obviously is losing out. We've seen, if you're a cardboard box manufacturer, you're in heaven at the moment because of the massive growth in home delivery. And there are a number of sectors that seem to be doing well. The people providing plastic screens for supermarkets to divide up the self-checkout tills. You think about the number of self-checkout tills there are across the world, and the proportion of those that will need those dividers. People are going to be in business for a long time just producing those that weren't doing anything like that before. And there are a lot of those kinds of opportunities. So it's getting closer to our customers as well and understanding what are they thinking about for these different scenarios, what strategies are they looking to adopt, and then thinking about what can we do and how can we take our capabilities into new spaces. So again, Leon gave us a very good example of that. But where can we stretch to? Where can we adapt to follow the money, rather than hoping that somehow our core business comes back, particularly if our core business has been devastated. And we're seeing a lot of that now. And people say, well, which are the companies that are likely to do this? And actually, if you look around, you already see it. You can see the companies that are already adapting, getting their act together, refocusing their strategy, looking for new markets, and those who are at the other end of the spectrum where they're almost paralyzed by the situation. The scenarios, thinking about what our strategy might be, is a good way of getting our leadership learning, our managers learning, getting them thinking and becoming more flexible, but also generating new ideas.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. It's good to see some questions coming through, so thank you so much for those as well. Question here from Rupert around, is it possible for businesses, do you think, Rohit, to take a long-term view, 10 to 20 years of big risk, particularly those like climate change, further pandemics? Should businesses be taking that view now, and if so, maybe how?
Well, I think the two big things that have come out of this is that for most organizations, governments and individuals, is we weren't prepared enough, and we didn't necessarily have all the skills to help us navigate through. So I think that the focus is now people saying, actually, we need to prepare for a range of possible risks. I think we've become more focused on supply chain disruption, whatever might cause it, and climate change is obviously a big one. So that's why so many people are thinking about adapting their supply chains, moving to more localized manufacture, small footprint manufacturing, new manufacturing techniques. And so that has a long-term impact, but you can deliver that transformational change in your business sometimes within 6 months. Some countries have got 3-year plans now to literally have local manufacturing of 80% of everything that they buy. And so long-term doesn't have to be 10 to 20 years. If you're in things like infrastructure, you're building power plants, you're creating things for the long-term future, then you still need to have a view of that. But the scenarios help you understand the environment you might be playing in. And then you can think about, well, what are our tactics to get that to market? What are our new partnership strategies? So I had a brilliant conversation with someone the other day who said ordinarily we would have moved into a market. We would have moved into a market. We would have put all our own money in to buy the assets. We'd have set up manufacturing. Now what we're saying is we need to minimize our risk, and we need to basically create new companies in every market where we crowdsource the investment from all the players in that market who might buy from us. So they have a stake, in a sense, in helping ensure our future. So they've gone from a totally different model, much lower cost of entry, and a much greater sharing of risk with the local community. And it's those kind of innovative ideas that I think help us work out how we deliver the long-term strategy. And then the skills bit, I think the most important thing we should be doing right now is encouraging our people to learn new skills, learn new ways of thinking, let go of a lot of the assumptions and beliefs we had about what made us successful, and really learn how to navigate what's coming. And the great thing is the learning now is almost free. You can get courses from Harvard, from Stanford, from pretty much all of the leading education providers for free. You pay for the certificate, but if you just want to learn the content, you can do this for free. And that's one of the most encouraging things I'm seeing, is where leadership teams are leading by example and taking on courses and talking to their colleagues about what they're learning and sharing. And that's bringing new thinking into the organization. And that helps people then work out the difference between the tactics we're adopting for the here and now and the ideas that we need to be exploring for the longer term. Clearly, it's very hard to raise money or get shareholders to back you on a 10-year plan right now. But if you can demonstrate that you're thinking about these different time horizons and the different actions you'll take, and showing that you're horizon scanning and doing the scenario planning for the longer term, that's showing your investors, that's showing your partners, that's showing your staff that you're thinking and that you're preparing for a range of possibilities, which gives you a much greater chance of survival.
Rohit, thank you for that. Quite a few reactions to that, and around certainly around the ESG agenda, and I think recognizing the supply chain questions. One point was raised around the B word, the Brexit word. Do you think what you're saying there, the shorter supply chains, will support UK PLC now that we're outside the EU?
I think this is a really interesting challenge, because Brexit was kind of born on the belief, or the economic strategy for Brexit was born on the belief that, we were moving to global Britain, we would be trading with South Korea, Australia, China, India, all these countries. Now the challenge is we can't even fly to most of these countries. They're not letting us. And whilst the pandemic is vibrant, it's going to be harder to do business with countries where you can't meet people face to face. And a lot of the cultures we were talking about developing business with expect face-to-face contact initially. So I think that makes it more challenging, and that maybe leads us more and more towards saying, if we're trying to serve export markets, maybe we serve them more with IP than we do with physical product, and we find new routes to take our expertise to market. But I think the reverse of that is also true, which is we'll have to manufacture more here in the UK in order to increase our resilience, and that creates a whole new set of opportunities. I think one group that's really going to benefit from all of this are the logistics companies. If you take the DHLs and people of this world, there's a real opportunity for them to work out how to set up small footprint manufacturing facilities where they can manufacture on behalf of their clients in any market, and then take that solution and almost drop it into every market in the same way as they've dropped in how to do logistics down to the last mile in every market. So it doesn't matter whether you're talking about 350,000 people in Iceland or 100 million plus people in Indonesia, you've got a model that you can take in and scale up rapidly. So I think we're going to see some very different solutions come about. I think climate change, the pandemic are driving those. Brexit is creating a whole new level of challenge around that as well. But I think the way in which we make Brexit work now will be very different in a world where it's harder to fly, people are reluctant to fly, and some markets are just going to be really hard to get access to. The US at the moment is banned from, or US citizens are banned from 166 countries. Less than 10 countries are saying you can come in without restrictions. About another 20 have got, quarantine on arrival or whatever, which makes it almost impossible to do business if you've got a quarantine in the country for 14 days before you can go out and meet your customer.
So, Rohit, one very last question, because I'm very keen to bring David in as well. Question coming in around your views on which sectors are already great at scenario planning. For example, Formula One, sit there and try and model every scenario. But which other ones stand out for you as models that we should look at?
Well, interesting enough, the military in certain countries are probably the model you would look at, because they have to plan for a whole range of scenarios in any engagement. And when you talk to military leaders, particularly when they're in conflict zones, they're not sure whether they're going to fight or feed when they arrive, and what their role will be. Will they be peacekeepers? Will they be taking on combatants? And so the military, I think, are a very good example of doing rapid scenario planning, rapid risk assessment around the different scenarios, and then action planning. Industrially, I don't think there's any one sector that you would say, the whole sector is really good. There are some companies that have turned scenario planning almost into an art form. You look at Shell, they were one of the ones who popularized it. Right now, we're seeing some really interesting stuff being forced upon the mid-tier in financial services, because the big financial services players had kind of automated their processes. They didn't really notice much difference in terms of servicing their customers. And the fintechs were already entirely digital, so they didn't notice an impact. But the mid-tier players, where you still had to go into a branch to do things, you had to do stuff by post and phone, they really struggled. So they've been forced into scenario planning to say, well, what could the near-term future look like, the next 2 or 3 years look like, so that we can work out how we now do smart automation and don't waste a lot of money, but catch up quickly. And the scenario planning is really helping them in that.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much for that. David, I'd like to turn to you if I may. I can't see you on screen at the minute, but hopefully you are there.
I am here.
Ah, brilliant. Fantastic. David, so from your perspective, from your research and your teaching around resilience and organizational agility, what do you think, just building on what Rohit has said there, what do you think an organization should be doing now to ensure they continue to remain resilient in those months ahead, given the range of plausible scenarios that Rohit's kind of outlined there? What can people do to maximize their resilience?
Yeah, and so morning, everyone. I thought the inputs we've had so far have been so fascinating. I thought Leon's insight first up was great, and I want to build on that because it really talked to the role of leadership and people. And then Rohit talking about the different scenarios and the need for adaptation moving forward. So I want to bring a conversation down to kind of the level of people and leadership in organizations. And I wanted to start with a quote from John Maynard Keynes that I think is so pertinent at the moment, that it said, "The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas as escaping old ones." And I think we're at that phase at the moment where we've got to let go of some of our assumptions about resilience, some of our assumptions about leadership, some of the assumptions about what made our organization successful in the past, because that might not necessarily make them successful in the future. And I thought Leon's input first up really challenged the notion of what resilience is, because the traditional sort of old notion of resilience is that it's about maintaining basic structures, functions, regardless of disruption. But what Leon introduced here was that resilience is actually about change, not so much about stability. It's about changing the organization before the cost of not changing the organization becomes too great. Therefore, for me, resilience is about adaptation to the future. And then Leon said himself, it's about thriving, not just surviving in this context. I think challenging the notion of what leadership means. I mean, I think that when we face a crisis like this, we get a paradox of leadership. And what everyone wants to see in a crisis is for a strong and stable leader to stand up and be heard, that everyone can get behind, the leader that's going to have the answers, that's going to set a vision, that's going to be kind of ambitious and charismatic and put in place structure and an expert group of people that are going to be able to resolve all of our challenges. Yet what we've seen over the last few months is that we've actually seen the emergence of leadership at all levels in organizations by people that we wouldn't normally see as being leaders in our organizations. More collective action, more improvisation and innovation, leadership at levels, creativity, more collaboration, people working across boundaries and borders, pulling others together to come up with creative solutions to keep our organizations alive. So I think our notion of leaders and leadership is changing. And I think we do need to think about shifting our thinking of leadership away from just this sort of hold on a heroic model of leadership where we're looking at the qualities of individual leaders and probably more towards the outcomes of leadership. And if you ask anyone in an organization, how would you know that this organization has effective leadership? People will come up with things like, we've got a shared sense of purpose, we've got a sense of belonging, we've got goals, we all know our place in the organization, it's collaborative, communicative, we're all sort of bought into it, we're all energized and motivated and engaged. And that normally boils down to three things. If you look at all of the ways in which people will talk about leadership, and those things being direction, alignment, and commitment. And if we can think about, do we achieve those things in our organizations? It really simplifies things. There's so much written about leadership. But if you think about the outcomes of leadership, not just about the quality of leaders, and we think about direction, alignment, and commitment. And for me, this is where people in organizations now need to be redoubling their efforts to ensure that, we have got a sense of direction. And do people genuinely feel that they've got a sense of direction? Are we aligning all of the activities across our organizations and broader? One thing that COVID has shown us is how interdependent everything is across supply chains, across sectors, across different organizations, across boundaries and borders and silos. And then have we genuinely got commitment of people? And I think that leaders can sometimes fall into the trap of believing that they've got those things. But actually, if we really talk to the people at the sharp end, they're not really feeling that they have got that sense of direction, alignment, commitment. I think the other thing that I wanted to introduce into this is that I think leadership moving forward is also really about the management of some tensions in organizations and working with paradox. And I saw in a sort of more regular environment under normal operations that we tend to fall into a kind of an either or thinking. But I think we really need to be thinking about balancing some of these tensions. And I'll just throw out 7 tensions that I see organizations grappling with at the moment that I'd be really interested if people listening, these tensions resonate. So I think pre-COVID that we were primarily focused on efficiency gain, and we drove a lot of the redundancy out of our systems. And by redundancy, I mean slack and spare resource. And if you drive the spare resource, you drive out the buffering capacity of organizations, and that's one of the core elements of resilience. So for me, the tension between the drive for efficiency and actually building some slack into our systems is a core tension that our leaders need to think about moving forward. I think the second one is a tension between consistency and diversity. And how many organizations were pushing to have a singular set of organizational values, a singular leadership competency model, like we want everyone to be the same in our organizations, rather than embracing diversity of perspectives, diversity of views, people that therefore are coming at our problems with a complexity of different views on that. I think the third one is that we become so preoccupied with a narrow operational focus. And to talk to sort of Rohit's point, the need for leaders to have this more peripheral strategic vision, I think, is absolutely critical. So how do we look up from the operational detail to see the bigger picture is another tension that I think leaders face. My fourth one would be cohesion versus tension. And this one's kind of more controversial, I guess, but how many organizations pre-COVID, a senior management team meeting people came together, did updates, and people weren't really willing to shake things up, rock the boat, because we wanted to keep the team cohesion, because we value that, rather than actually saying, maybe we need some productive tension in our organizations to actually make the changes that are necessary. I think the fifth one for me is a shift from more compliance-based thinking to more mindfulness-based thinking. This is really, for me, about valuing our employees, just as Leon said. It's not that we want people on autopilot in our organizations. We want them to use their judgment to be creative problem solvers and empower them to do that. And kind of connected to that, for me, is the 6th point, which is that in a crisis, what we tend to do is centralize decision making, where for me, we need to be doing the opposite. We need to be decentralizing. So what we tend to have is kind of centralized control of decision making and then local implementation, rather than local implementation and then centralized coordination. So I think so many organizations I see, particularly in the first few months of the crisis, it was the senior management team making all the decisions, and they fall into the trap of thinking that communications involvement And, you know, informing people is not the same as involving them in the decision making and in the strategic change moving forward. So I hear a lot of organizations sort of patting themselves on the back at the moment saying, you know, we communicated, we over communicated. Yeah, but do people really feel involved? And then the last one would be that I think we need to balance what will inevitably be a kind of reactive learning approach. You know, so many organizations will do a review and we'll look back and say, you know, we've learned the lessons from this, but will we actually engage in the proactive adaptation that's required? You know, and I think that for me is really getting organizations to think with sort of a more design thinking mindset. And I think that touches on what Rohit was saying, that we need to imagine a new future. And I think there is an opportunity. There's a window of opportunity now where organizations can stop. They can look at the future and maybe challenge some of the assumptions, challenge the ways that were working before, and really think about that adaptation for the future. You know, some organizations that are already saying things like, you know, we've made a digital leap in 3 months that we wouldn't have made in 3 years. Well, how do we keep that change changing? What was it that created that? Because as soon as you take the burning platform away, the danger is everyone goes back to, you know, business as normal. Whereas I think there really is an opportunity at the moment for organizations to push forward and really think about what is their purpose, what are they trying to achieve? And that might be something completely different. And I thought, you know, what Leon said right at the start of the day was fantastic. A great example of, you know, managing some of those tensions.
David, thank you so much for that. You've covered an enormous amount of ground there, and as ever, I think, you know, the direction, alignment, commitment points, and then the 7 principles and the 7 tensions you got there. I think, you know, that those will really resonate with people. I wonder if you just might. So just reflecting on that, can you then suggest a leadership style of someone who, you know, who's out there that you think, okay, that they are walking the water, they are showing us what that looks like in these times? Is there anyone that stands out for you in the public eye at this point?
I think it's really difficult, and I think it's difficult again looking at any single individual. I think that we need to look more at the organizations, and any organization where leaders are playing. I think leaders need to play a dual role at the moment. So there's the one role that they're playing is actually being that stable figure that everyone wants to see in the organization, that gives some semblance of control and calm. Yet the second role that they need to play is create the environment where adaptation and innovation take place in our organization. And I mean, what better example than the one from Leon earlier, where you've actually, you know, taken engagement to a level where you're saying, you know, it's not just engagement, it's ownership of the organization. And that's that balancing of that centralization, decentralization, enabling people to take forward and innovate. And a critical element of this is having the psychological safety to do it. And I've seen, you know, what I would say would be really good leadership at the moment are those leaders that are creating a kind of holding environment where people can innovate, because we've been through such a crisis. You know, there's been so much disruption and anxiety that's been provoked at this time. And there'll be a huge fear of failure moving forward. But the challenge with some of the scenarios that Rohit was talking about is that we don't currently have the solution. We don't have either a real clear outcome that we're trying to achieve. You know, people will talk about things at the moment like, you know, a green recovery. You know, what really is that? What's the outcome? What's the process for getting there? You know, it's all very vague, and anything that has uncertainty and ambiguity creates anxiety. And if people are anxious, then they won't innovate because there's too much fear of failure. So I would say great leadership at the moment is creating the psychological safety for people to be able to take the risks, to be able to invest in innovation, and without fear of failure. And, you know, keep creating that safety blanket under the organization that says, you know, we really want you to be creative problem solvers. If you fail, you know, we're supporting you. And I think that's a very different view of leadership to the strong, stable leader that stands up and says, I've got the answers to the organization's problems, because that might work for a technical, kind of tame, complicated problem. It doesn't typically work well for a really complex, wicked type of problem that we face. And I mean, I think Brexit would be another great example of that.
Yeah.
It was framed as we're going to have strong, stable leadership, and small expert group of people are going to resolve this, rather than it's going to be a more collaborative endeavour, bringing in the diversity of views, diversity of perspectives to resolve the problem. Yeah.
And David, I think you touched on a lot of themes there, and one that was summarised, I think, earlier in these forums as authentic leadership as well. And that's what's most important, or one of those factors that's very important as well. I wonder if I might just ask you one very quick last question, just for a quick fire response to this, David. At what level should change be driven in terms of the leadership changes you're talking? Is it top down, bottom up, or both?
For me, it's got to be an element of both. Leaders need to be playing a role in that direction, alignment and commitment, but enabling the bottom up innovation and adaptation.
Okay, very good.
Quick fire response.
Quick fire, no, absolutely. So, David and Rohit, thank you for that. And Rohit, thank you for being so busy and answering so many of the questions that are coming through on the chat. Very grateful for you for doing that and making our job easier here. So we started this forum back in March with perspectives from our leaders from Robert Half and Protiviti. So I thought it would only be fair to let them have the last say in our season one as well. So I'm delighted to welcome back Layla Tyndall, a Managing Director in our Robert Half Executive Search Division, and also Peter Richardson, our UK Country Lead for Protiviti in the UK. Layla, as a Managing Director in Robert Half, what have been your key takeaways in the last 20 weeks, and what would you say have been the main impacts of COVID on the markets you focus on?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. What a remarkable 20 weeks it's been in this year of 2020. I had a few points to speak to. Largely, I'm now going to ad-lib because David has spoken to most of them very eloquently. So uncovered a lot of what I'm going to say. So I'm now going to add to David's answer and try and expand on that tentatively. So I think since the pandemic broke out, we've seen so many organisations, everyone change across every industry. COVID-19 has accelerated business transformation in a way we've never seen before. Some people's guess is 5 years, other experts will say 10 years. So innovation and different working patterns have brought, all these changes, and at the heart of all this has been the people agenda. It's the skill, talents and collaboration of people who've solved problems, who bore the brunt of the issues and the impacts, all the emotions that we've had to go through. Clearly, leaders have played an important role, but also, as David says, our people and the rapid response and adaptation, I think, has taken us all by surprise, but has actually become the new norm. So what have we seen? We've seen in the early days our clients moving to keep people safe, fostering connectivity, caring, a very, very stressful time for organisations, very internally focused. As we've moved through, people were maintaining morale, maintaining productivity for their workforces, whilst grappling with the backdrop of, unprecedented times, government legislation, negative cash flow. At Robert Half, we've been doing exactly the same. Our own global transition to working from home was seamless, I have to say. 100% of staff successfully transitioned almost overnight, and the recent heavy investment in our own IT infrastructure absolutely paid off. So what have we seen? Main change, main impacts, it's been skills, leadership, ways of working. So skill sets, having the right adaptability. Sorry, I won't say that. I won't try that again. I'm going to put my finger, move on to the next word. Attitude, resilience have been key. We are seeing this in the job descriptions and the hiring requirements, the way they're being positioned to us. There's been an uptick in different types of, the IT and technical skills. And recent research from Robert Half has found around 70% of European and UK workers currently employed are reassessing their career goals, 24% of which are actively looking for a new job. This is hardly surprising when employees have spent 5 months at home with time to reflect on what is important to them. So I would urge leaders to think about that. We've heard about engagement, communication. So the leadership aspect brought about a greater need for empathy, listening, and understanding. My view is that any leaders who have not demonstrated empathy, sincerity, authenticity, and integrity in their style have a limited shelf life with both their teams and shareholders. And then just on remote ways of working, I think we all need to think about for our own employees and also for new hires about how we set that out, hybrid home working and office policies. Okay. And look to businesses like Google, who have recently announced to their employees that no one will be returning to the office. To Rohit's point earlier, Facebook have announced that all employees will be allowed to work from home permanently now. We need to consider these things as we move forward.
Layla, thank you for that. A fantastic roundup. Thank you ever so much. So Peter, to wrap us up then, Peter, what are your perspectives on what is most important now for Protiviti, as well as our clients, and as our business leader in the UK? How can we get our clients to be facing the future with as much confidence as possible?
Okay, thanks, Paul. In a minute or so, yeah.
Go on, 3 minutes. You got 2 or 3 minutes. It's easy.
I'll cut it down a bit. Thanks everyone for attending, and thanks for the opportunity here to share a few ideas. Look, I agree very strongly with what both David and Layla have just said. For me, what I'm looking for from this is, as an optimist actually, is how do we get to be better than usual? Not how do we return to business as usual, but how do we get to be better than usual as a consequence of this? And I think, as David said, the role of leadership and people, the thought of escaping old ideas, the idea that resilience is about change and adaptation. That's the word, Layla, adaptation. And picking up on David's points, I think our role now and what I'm looking forward to is what I would call reimagining our future, reimagining our business and benefiting from much of what we've learned. And I think that needs to take into account, as Layla said, remote working, the future of the office, face-to-face, how that works. I think we need to take into account much more strongly the whole set of values around innovation, collaboration, inclusion. We need to make sure that we keep people at the centre of our thinking, particularly being authentic in that thinking and the impact that it has on our brand if we're not. And I think also we need to think bigger and bolder. We're trying to do all of that at the moment. I think there is a lot of opportunity, being a little bit more parochial about it, particularly for the services sector and for organisations like ours in professional services. So let's think about, not whether we're in or out of the office, but why the office, what the office is for. Let's think about benefiting from what we've achieved so far. We've been more collaborative, we've been more productive, we've been more creative. We've actually engaged more with our clients, actually, I think, even remotely than we did previously. And we're getting our brand and our thought leadership out there more quickly, more smartly. We've created more thought-provoking content more quickly and changed much more rapidly, again, as David was saying, than we might have ever dreamed was possible. And I think we need to continue to build on that, push through and benefit from it. And I would say, look, let's not sleepwalk back into the past or forward into the future. Let's benefit from this change. Let's pause, let's reimagine, let's reinvent, and let's be bold and collaborate and be stronger together as we go forward.
Fantastic. Fantastic summary, Peter. Thank you ever so much. So look, it's 9 o'clock. As ever, I'm going to get shouted at by my team for overrunning, but this isn't quite the end. As I said, we'll leave the lines open for more informal discussion if you can make that. Fantastic. And also, as I mentioned, this is only the end of our season 1. In season 2, over the summer, starting in a fortnight, we'll be bringing you some even bolder, even fresher, even newer perspectives to inspire you and give you new ideas. as you sip your pina coladas on the French Riviera, or even in your hot tub in the UK, whatever you choose. But we'll have round the world sailors, we'll have professional poker players, we'll have TV comedy writers, all with amazingly different perspectives, but ones that you can bring back to your own world. So please look out for the invite, as we're very excited about these almost fireside chats we'll have. So thank you once again to today's panelists, to Rohit and to David, and to all our panelists over the weeks. Really, really grateful to you. Thank you also to our attendees for all your support. And thank you also to all of our unsung heroes behind the scenes every week, from Robert Half and Protiviti, who've made this forum such a success, from Gary Reynolds, Rebecca McNicholas, Jay Thompson, Roxanne Mathis, Sristi Harrison, Layla, Peter, Matt Weston, Sean Fothergill, and everyone else from Protiviti and Robert Half who have helped. You've all been stars, so thank you very, very much. We sincerely hope this forum and this series have been useful, and you can apply some of these thinkings to your own businesses. So on behalf of my team at Protiviti and Robert Half, I'd like to extend our best wishes to you all. Stay safe, be kind to each other, move forward with confidence, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully in 2 weeks' time. Take care, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well done, Paul. Thank you.
Well done, Paul. Thank you. I see loads of people dropping off at the moment, actually.
Yeah, we'll give people a second.
Yeah. Oh, they're starting now. Yeah.
I have to go, Paul.
That's fine. Thank you, Peter. So, Paul, I'm sorry, Paul. I don't know if you're still on with us. The other Paul. Oh no, Paul Clayton's left, actually. Left the conversation.
We won't know what it is. Did he type it? No.
He didn't.
David
Leon, are you still on? Leon, I can still see you, I think.
Yeah, I'm around.
So Leon, you're a star. You're a resilience consultant now. Thriving, not surviving. Yeah, you're
an example of great leadership and how to pivot under stress and crisis, and act and lead with integrity.
I know all the right words to say.
You do. That's what I mean. You're a resilience consultant.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you haven't announced this to your staff yet? No,
there's 2 people that know at the moment. Because I want to get it all tied down. It's quite a process. It's quite a lot of legal, and you basically have to set up a trust company and get it all signed off by HMRC and set up proper contracts so they effectively take ownership of it and make sure that I can't control it without them knowing, and all sorts of things. So it's a proper process where you physically hand over the ownership of the company, and I have an influence because hopefully they'll ask me to hang around for a little while. At some point they may not.
So Leon, what drove you? What were your driving factors in deciding to do that? Did you just wake up one morning, or was it a gradual? This is the best way forward.
Well, I don't know whether you recall this, but I woke up one morning and I was driving to work, and it was that morning where there was that emergency nurse on the radio, or there was a video of her, wasn't there, where she tried to go to the supermarket and combining fresh vegetables.
I remember that.
And it's just things like that just really get me. And so that was really the starting point for all of this. And we gave away one of our vans. We could be using it now because we're really busy, but at the time I thought, we're not going to use this, let's put it to some use. And we donated it to Feeding Coventry, a food bank run by a church in Coventry, and they've been using it for the last 3 months, helping people get through this. And there are just little things when you reflect, and I sincerely mean part of the decision, or part of the feeling I have about this, is the generosity that you and Layla have shown, Paul, and other people within your organisation. I've always had a belief that if you do the right thing, people will do the right thing also. I've probably led my life being continually disappointed until this point. And I think people have really stepped up within this business and outside of it. And it's something I thought about a while ago and thought, it's not quite right, or I can't do it, or I can't give up control because that's not right for me and my family. And I think it just feels the right time. So,
sorry, Paul.
Yeah.
So, a quick question. What's your staff strength? How many staff have you got in the organisation?
Within Protiviti in the UK?
No, not Protiviti. Question for sorry,
I think Paul. For me.
Sorry, for Leon.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, Leon rather. Sorry.
Yeah. So there are 33 people that are employed permanently with us, and we've got 200 people working on the current projects. It'll be 30. Well, they don't have to join this new business.
Okay.
But if they do, it'll be 30 odd people that will own the business. Direct ownership, yeah.
Interesting. Thank you.
David and Rohit, what are you? Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, David, it's obviously a very bold strategy that Leon's got there, and driven by the belief in the empowerment of people. Do you think that is going to be? Do you think we'll see that in other companies as well? Do you think we'll see, not even structural kind of legal shifts in companies, but do you think we'll see that trend elsewhere?
I'd like to say yes. I think my more cynical view would be there's probably going to be less enlightened business leaders out there. I think what we've seen is that organizations have relied on their people a lot. And I think that in many cases, people have pulled through, and they've worked out problems, they've solved issues, they've been thrown challenges, and a lot of people, have worked crazily hard to get organizations through a difficult period. And I think, there's a recognition of that. I'm not sure as many will go as far as Leon's example of creating some sort of new ownership structure. I think that's going to be a minority. But I think what we will see is, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that we'll see is more of that decentralized empowerment in all organizations.
Yeah. Rohit?
Yeah, I agree that it's unlikely that the FT 100 will be employee owned by the end of next year. But what I do think is that people are starting to think about some of those things. Not everyone, but some people are starting to think, like Leon, what is the right model going forward? How do we come back better rather than just recover what we have? And I think it's really powerful when you see examples like Leon's, that it gets people thinking. And there will be a number of people on the call today who thought that was quite inspiring. There'll be a few of them who go on and investigate, talk about it. And the other thing is, we are wiping out a huge number of jobs right now. A lot of the real job losses are to come. If you look at the big banks, a lot of the professional service firms, all sorts of people guaranteed employment until sometime between September and December. But after that, I think you'll see a wave of headcount reduction. And those people will then go on and start new businesses. And they may well start businesses with a few friends and actually create effectively employee-owned businesses. So I think it's in that new wave of businesses that come through as a result of the pandemic that we might see a lot more experimentation in terms of organizational structures, organizational design, ownership models. The other thing I think we're going to see is, because the technology is allowing it, is a change in ownership structure of listed companies, where I'm hearing more and more people talk about the idea of saying, when I go shopping to Marks and Spencer's or Amazon or wherever, I should be able to round up my transaction from £12.50 to £15 and be able to buy shares in that company at a discount. And actually, the extent of to which we could do that really quickly could change the whole way management of those companies work. Because although you've got still some very dominant shareholders who own large blocks of shares, in terms of voting, you'll have a lot more individual shareholders who have more of a stake. And you might see a growth in employee ownership of that as well, that says, basically every month, take a little bit more of my money and put it into share ownership. So I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation around those kinds of things in the coming years, because no one knows the right answer. But what we do know is that the current model is very, very inefficient, as we heard from David. You know, there's just a lot of issues with that.
No, fantastic. Very, thank you, and David, thank you for that. Any perspectives from anyone else? As I say, this is more of a bit of a free-for-all forum. So,
Paul, I think Paul Claydon has typed his message. I don't know if he's able to, if he's still on the call. He's typed his question. Paul, are you still on the call?
no, we've had some good. Oh, Paul's still there. Yeah, he's typing. We've had some audio gremlins this morning, haven't we?
Yeah. Should we read that out? Should we put that to the panel?
If you could do, yeah.
Yeah. So Paul's commented on the digital and tech world that can add a lot of value to other sectors. Finds it frustrating that employers tend to pigeonhole leaders. Is there more scope now to cross the invisible boundaries? Rohit and David, who would like to take that first?
I'll have a quick stab. I think there's some very interesting stuff going on with tech. So we can see that if you took the top 5 players out of the US stock, results of the US stock market right now would be horrendous. A huge chunk of the growth that's happened is in just the 5 big players. And they're pulling away from the pack. And so people are beginning to realize how central digital is to our existence. And there's going to be, you know, a lot more spent on digital in the coming years. But then there's also data that says something like 70% of digital transformation efforts fail to, you know, deliver on their goals or fail completely. And the OECD has figures that show that for all the investment in technology in the last 20 years, there's been very little impact on productivity. So we've got to get it right now with technology. I think we're going to see a new wave with technology of much smarter choices about what technology to use, how to deploy it, and how to train people to get the value from it. And that's some of the things like robotic process automation and hyper automation might be useful, because that's where the individuals doing the task are actually doing the automation of the task. So they're working out the rules for automating a lot of the stuff they did. And so you might actually find much smarter applications of the technology. And the other thing I think is that there's a lot of data that shows that the failure rate of tech startups is actually increasing. And so what we'll see is a lot of great ideas coming through, but then becoming available cheap because the companies that created them have gone away. People will be able to pick up those ideas cheaply. Big corporations might then sort of strip the assets or pick up the assets cheaply. And we might see a faster dissemination of new thinking. A lot of people have been telling me that this period has allowed them to deliver innovation faster with a lot less of the bureaucratic process that slowed them down, and with a much stronger focus on what's actually going to make a difference now or in the next few months, and let's experiment more. So I'm encouraged that we could do better things with technology. I'm not convinced that everyone is skilled up enough to do that.
Rohit, I couldn't agree with you more. I think from our perspective, in a staffing perspective, I think that having seen the pivoting of our own organisation and of our clients, you know, if you think that globally almost 100%, pretty much 100% of our business is now being conducted in a virtual environment. That means over the last few months, Robert Half has been doing virtual interviewing successfully and onboarding successfully virtually, with no face-to-face contact, with no visits to offices. All the traditions have gone about, you know, seeing the physical environment, meeting the people that you work for. I think it's here to stay. I think we are at the beginning of a digital revolution, and already we have learned new ways of. I hadn't used Teams before. Protiviti were very adept on Teams and using it all the time. Staffing a bit less so. There are little nuances now that are happening. You know, emojis, you know, various things and ways of communicating. And I think that all of these tech startups will start to develop those. We'll soon see, you know, communication, digital communication will start to replicate the bits that we're missing. So some of the softer sides, some of the emotions and we'll be able to see coloured screens, for example, and different sets of emojis to illustrate quickly. And we will start to learn in this new digital environment. I definitely think it's here to stay. So no, I couldn't agree more. And I think there are some applications and innovations that we will use digitally that have been there in the background, but have now accelerated because the sponsorship is there from the company, and the appetite for innovation and the space to create and innovate has been opened up in some companies, not in all.
I have a quick question. Good morning. I wanted just to find out what is the thinking, maybe David, on empathy and the role of empathy and the heart of a company in this new dispensation. Because, for example, tourism, and even through people looking back on how these tourism entities have demonstrated heart. I'm seeing the whole thing of you talked about authentic leadership. So that is coming out in the persona of a company. What is the role of a company's persona in how they do things in this new dispensation? So you have the tech side, you have all the productivity and the resilience, but how does empathy and the heart of a company play or twin with resilience?
Well, I think it's absolutely central, but for a few different reasons. I mean, I think firstly, primarily, that people want to feel like they work in an organization where they are valued and that people care. And, you know, a caring environment is one of those things that's a real intrinsic motivation for people to get on and do their jobs and work and feel safe to do so. But I think you also touched on some other points there, that a number of organizations, particularly early in the crisis, that made some very swift redundancies very early before others in their sector were very much seen by the press and the public as sort of not caring as organizations. And I think that did some reputational damage to those organizations. I think the third element of empathy that I would drop into this is I mentioned very briefly design thinking, and you know, I think I'm doing quite a lot of work at the moment that's bringing design thinking into the resilience lens, and it's that building adaptation for the future, because one of the central elements of design thinking starts with the empathy for the customer of the future, putting yourselves in the shoes of what might be the needs of customers in 2-5 years time. And that is actually a way of creating that platform for innovation. So I think in both terms, in terms of being a caring organization, in terms of the reputation, and in terms of driving innovation, empathy is central to all of that.
Can I add something to that as well? I think so. In recruiting leadership, I'm particularly pleased with the elevation in status of a number of initiatives around diversity and inclusion. And I think all of them are equally important. Black Lives Matter, BAME, Women in Leadership, ESG agenda, green economy, you know, Pride, LGBTQ. I mean, all of them. I think it's really important, you know, and David, I completely agree with all of your points. And I would say that it's really important to look at the diversity, not just from the different groups, you know, physically or from a gender-wise, but cognitive diversity. In order for an organization to be able to innovate, you know, have people that can, you know, design, think, and recreate, we need cognitive diversity. I was about to do a latitude, and actually I think we, you know, need to start placing more importance on assessing our cognitive diversity, because it is conscious and unconscious. You know, it's unconscious biases that we have, that we think we are, you know, hiring new talent or assessing people or assessing performance consciously, but we're not. We're doing it unconsciously because we're human. And there are tools and education and awareness and applications and ways of doing this now that I think will increase that and therefore we can show that is also one of the actions where we can start to create a company and an organisation with empathy at its heart, as well as all the other important attributes that we've all referenced earlier: sincerity, authenticity, integrity.
If I could just make a point about that there, which I think I completely agree with everything that Layla's just said. The challenge for a lot of organisations is, how do you align that passion to do something and make a difference and really make inroads on this agenda, or these different agendas, and our internal processes? And the classic one, you hear time and time again, is that people say they want to buy from sustainable enterprises, from small enterprises, from social enterprises, and they find what they want, and it might be soap, it might be food for the kitchen, it might be pencils for people to use. And then it comes to procurement, and procurement are saying, no, we're a big organization with 30,000 people. We need you to produce at scale and to match the price we can get from XYZ soap company. And then all those good intentions disappear. And I think this is where companies need to start thinking beyond a few individuals with good intent to really saying, how do we embed that thinking across all of our processes, and in particular procurement, which is where we can make a real difference. And if we can't meet the standards of our procurement people, how do we go in and help those suppliers to actually scale up to deliver to us, rather than just saying, well, you're not big enough, or you're not, you don't have the right quality standards? How do we actually help those people grow their enterprises and move them forward?
I think that's got to be around values, isn't it? If you're living your values, if you set the values and you are given permission, you are giving your workforce permission to work within those values. If there's a deliberate intention and purpose, to David's points earlier around direction, alignment, and David?
Direction, alignment, and commitment.
Commitment. So if you're committed. Thank you, Paul. Well done. You were listening.
Very good.
But yeah, so if you are living those values, if you're committed to that, then actually the price per unit of something from a sustainable and ethically sourced smaller supplier, the financial cost, the measurement of the financial cost becomes equal or less important to the commitment to work working to your values as an organization. David, I don't know if you would add to that and perhaps put it in a more articulate way.
No, I agree. I think I don't think I've got much to add, really. I think you're right. Paul, I'm going to need to drop off.
That's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
David and Rohil, really appreciate your time and for joining us here. So no, thank you ever so much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Yeah, it was good to meet everyone. Good questions.
Yeah, I think we'll draw it to a close, unless anyone has anything else burning they want to ask, because we're almost at past. But as I say, thank you all so much. It's been fascinating today, and it's been a really great one today. Yeah,
thank you.
Rohit, David, and everyone, thank you ever so much.
Okay, bye now.
See you all soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye,
Goodbye.
David.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Rohit. Take care. Bye.
Okay, I think we're closed. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, I think we are. So that's it. Well done. Well done, Paul. Woo! And despite the glitch,
That's all right.
oh, Sean's still on. Yeah, I thought you did well then. Actually, I did think we would probably be